Well, here we are, Boris, at the end of 3 days of recording, and you look as fresh as you did at the beginning of day one. These are it's a very interesting combination of sonatas that you've got here. Let's look at the Grieg, first of all. When did you first come across it?
It comes from my early childhood. I was 7 when I first heard it. My grandma was playing it. I stood near the piano and I fell in love with the piece, and I wanted to play it ever since. And I did a few years ago, and now I wanted as much to record it.
And what does it tell you about Grieg the pianist? Because the other two sonatas on this record, the Liszt and the Rachmaninoff second sonatas, both these people were, of course, legendary, masterly pianists. What light do you see Grieg in as a pianist?
The interesting thing is, when I first started studying the sonata, I was always hearing it as an orchestral piece, and I was imagining various orchestrations, because it sounds a lot like something which could be done for a small chamber orchestra, very Mendelssohn-like. I think that his writing is at least as comfortable for the piano as, say, Beethoven. Probably more, which says more about Beethoven than about Grieg. But I feel more about Grieg, the person, the man inside the music. You know, all the passion and the fire and this drive and this impetus, this lack of reservation about things, this lightness, this good humor, which I love very much. They always bring me into a very good mood.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the other two sonatas on the record, what prompted you to put these together, and how do you think they complement each other? How does one serve the other to produce a satisfying meal?
I'd say that the Grieg is the lighter one. It's I wouldn't call it a starter, but it could have been one. It's more compact in its size. I might be hateful for it, but there is a sense of cuteness in it, a certain lovability. Oh, yeah. It's very pleasant to hear. It invokes no dark thoughts. It's exciting. So it's very balanced.
It also evokes nostalgia.
A nostalgia. It has moments of beauty, of passion, but I would say that the amplitude between the very top and the very bottom is not extreme.
You mean the range of...
Yes, the range. If you think of some of the Mahler symphonies, between the highest point and the lowest point, you have an eternity.
But the slow movement of the Grieg, it's interesting. When we were recording it, the first few takes, you were wondering whether you were thinking of it too much in terms of depth, in terms of brooding, too broodingly, and whether it was quite that kind of movement. In the end, it seemed to me you compromised is a dreadful word, but you achieved a sort of mean.
Yes, no, I do think that the take that we chose had a certain under layer.
Yes.
So it was not just the melody, which is utterly beautiful.
There is more to it than that. Granted, there's not a Mahlerian range.
No.
But I always think that Debussy's oft-quoted comment about Grieg, a pink fondant stuffed with snow, is terribly mean.
Because the music is utterly sincere. It's
utterly.
I think in general, Grieg has not written a bad note in his life. For any instrument, and I think that his character, as far as I know, he was a very nice, very gentle man, and I think it shows through in his music. And this is a young man's work, and even though, as you said, young men feel very deeply, and it's not just the exuberance and the energy which is there. I think that from these three sonatas, this one is just as an exhibit in a museum, it would be the most interesting to watch from all sides. So not just one view, not just one picture, but lots of smaller things that combine and complement each other very nicely inside the sonata to make a meal in itself.
It's also interesting that he gave it an opus number, unlike his symphony, which he is youthful, even more youthful, I think. And he instructed that nobody should perform this symphony, and then, of course, put it into a museum where anybody could look at it and perform it. But I don't think it's got an opus number, whereas he clearly rated this sonata because he gave it an opus number, opus 7, and intended it to be published, and probably was proud of it.
I read a story about this sonata when he brought it to his teacher of composition. It's one of these musical anecdotes from a book of musical anecdotes. They say that this teacher had a habit of drinking water when he was excited about something. They say that
drinking water?
Or drinking water when he was excited about something. So they say that while reading the sonata, he drank a whole jug of water. So yeah, I think it's this sort of piece. Yeah. So just if one looks at the variety of the material that we have in the Grieg, from a warm, intimate / reservedly passionate opening, which in just 10 seconds will transform into then the second very lyrical, very sun in a meadow subject. Then a moment of darkness. And that's just 3 small samples from 5 minutes of music. That's just the first movement. And the rest of them are as rich and varied. I like the connection between the Grieg and the Liszt, not so much musically, but personally, because Grieg came to Liszt and presented him with the score of his concerto, which Liszt sight-read and was very excited about, and promoted afterwards. So I thought that's a nice background.
What would one not have given to have been a fly on the wall to listen to that read through the Grieg,
and how he got excited about this G natural in the very end. It was utterly brilliant. So yeah, well, I think that this concerto is very exciting, and if you imagine that no one has heard it before, or at least Liszt hasn't heard it before, and just to encounter it for the first time, it must be quite a thing.
Looking at the Liszt sonata, if one can generalize, which one shouldn't too much, which side do you come down on with the Liszt sonata more one than the other? Do you see it as a classical piece with romantic colours, or a romantic piece with classical principles?
I'd say that for me, Liszt always stood on its own. So I never dissected it into elements, whether structural or whatever. It seems to be a work that's so complete and perfect in itself that it demands almost no analysis beyond the interthematic relationship and how he develops various themes. And how, oh yes, yeah. And the material itself is so rich and so, the theatrical build-up of this huge work, 30 minutes, and basically one movement, of course, various interlocking structures. I'd say that from a purely technical point of view, the transparency, the clarity has more to do with the classical period than with the romantic one. And if one compares it with the Rachmaninoff, for example, one sees right away that the Rachmaninoff is firmly rooted in the romantic. Yes. Whereas, which makes the Rachmaninoff somehow easier to play. Because this transparency...
On one level.
On one level, of course. But I must say that the experience of performing the Liszt, it's well, it would be a bit of a cliche to say it's like a journey, but it is utterly fascinating because you are as much creating this theatrical piece on the stage while performing as just bringing whatever you have prepared at home. There is a countless amount of possibilities of progressing from one section to another. And when you start playing it, you never really know which path you're going to take. And usually what suggests the right path is the music itself, because each time it's a different piano, a different hall, a different audience, you're a different mood or whatever. And then when you look backwards and you realize that what you've just played was not basically the same piece that you've played a few days or a few weeks or a few months ago. And I think this is a common trademark of some of the greatest pieces, probably not just piano pieces, also some of the biggest symphonies, the greatest works, that they contain within themselves the potential for being many different works within the same musical material.
So how does this translate to the recording studio?
Well, the recording studio allows you to experiment a lot because you are not constricted to just one reading as you would be at a concert. You can record several takes, listen to different things, agree, disagree, share opinions with the producer, with other people. I'd say that the possible downside of recordings that you do not have this flow of time which you would have during a concert, where there is just one possibility available, and this is the one that you have, and you commit yourself totally to it. And the perception of the flow of time changes while you're on stage. It's not just for the Liszt, it's for any work. The amount of focus and clarity which you have while performing on stage in front of an audience is something which cannot be simulated at home, at a lesson, at the studio, ever. It's something that exists only at a live concert. So that's one of the big pluses of live concerts and one of the big excitements.
Of course. It's interesting because recording artists, I find, tend, broadly generalizing, tend to fall into one of three categories. The one who, let's take pianists because I'm talking to one. The pianist who will go into the recording studio and pretend he's playing to his grandmother. And this works for him or her. The pianist who goes into the studio and uses the medium absolutely to its full, uses the red light as a liberator, not a stifler, and therefore is able to take huge risks. Because the risks that don't come off will end up on the floor. And therefore there is no, I must get this right. But the person who plays to his grandmother is possibly one of the, I must get this right brigade, because that's it, he's pretending it's a concert.
Right.
The third? And the third, a cellist I work with until recently used to surround himself, and I still work with him, but until recently he used to surround himself with soft toys. Sitting in a semicircle, and used to invite his dad to the sessions, and that would be the audience. Right. Do you fall into any of those categories?
I'm probably closest to the second. Mm-hmm. I'm completely into taking risks, as you know. I never try to imagine it is a concert, because it would just not work for me. The amount of adrenaline I have in my system before a concert that just gets released naturally is something which I don't have in the studio, and I don't know how to induce it. So therefore, it's quite useless to try and pretend that I'm at the concert. I just don't have the right physical state for a concert. I don't agree with those who say that a recording is just a snapshot of their thoughts of the work on that day. It's natural that views on a certain work change with time. So in a few years, what I or you thought about the work today would not be as valid as it is now. But I do feel that, or at least that's my approach, that's what I'm trying to do at the studio, is that I do have certain ideal of the interpretation, which I'm striving towards, which I'm trying to achieve. And usually the works that I record are works that I had more experience with on the concert platform.
Sure.
So often it's several years worth of experience. So I do have a certain interpretation that I like, or which I find that is true to the spirit and the letter of the work both. Though I must say that a few times during these sessions we encountered new things that I haven't thought about before. It was as exciting as anything.
For me too.
Yeah.
A singer friend of mine said to me recently that when he's doing a run of opera performances, and one of them is streamed down the web via satellite to various places, art centres, the one that is being relayed finds him reacting differently, less to the audience out there, more to the singer who's singing with him, and he'll use more television techniques that would not necessarily travel the length of a theatre.
But would be relayed via the cameras.
But would be fantastic to look at people sitting with their popcorn in cinema.
And watching the...
Yeah.
I thought about this camera thing, and I realized what was in the camera that made me change my performance. It was my previous experience for filming for TV, and then we had no edits. So it had to be in one take.
Right.
So my association with video filming is no edits.
Right.
Which means you're much closer to this total commitment thing, which you would have at a concert.
It doesn't make you feel, no edits, I must make no mistakes, and therefore it falls between two stools. On the one hand, there's not the adrenaline of a live concert where there are going to be mishaps and triumphs. And on the other hand, it's not really live because you're being told by the camera that if there are no re-edits possible, then everything you do is set in stone.
Well, you could watch it as a fourth type of experience or third type of experience. But I think that at that point of our recording, I was warmed up enough to approach somewhat the state of a performance.
Turning to the Rachmaninoff, I notice you've opted for the 1931 revision. Typical Rachmaninoff insecurity. He had this much bigger 1913 version and this much more tight 1931 version. And I think this is a different case, isn't it, from disapproving of cuts in the Second Symphony or the Third Concerto.
Absolutely.
Or was it the Corelli variations?
Yes.
Yes, if somebody
he
coughed,
himself, yes.
if somebody
he would
coughed,
jump.
you would think the audience wasn't concentrating and would feel all insecure and leave out the next variation, allegedly.
Terrible.
This is a different case, the sonata, isn't it? Why have you opted for the later version?
I feel that the 1931 version is not just because of the cuts, but because of the thing that he rewrote and reharmonized, and also because of the cuts. The ending result is that it's much more close-knit, much more organic, and finally stronger as a result. The 1913 version has some very nice places, but they're nice on their own. They don't serve the overall purpose of the sonata form, of the development, as much as the shorter cuts or whatever alterations he made. Before making this recording, just to have a clear conscience, I took the score once again and I read through it a few times to see if there are a few things that I could incorporate, because he himself authorized Horowitz to do a combination of the two, but I ended up with just one chord, which I really liked.
That was very nice chord.
But the place, the Rachmaninoff, the one chord that I did incorporate, is just before the end.
From the first edition.
From the first edition is just the transition from the development, the end of the development, into the reprise, which is a big climax with lots of bells. There's a chord which is the second version, just the same chord. Whereas the first first edition had an extra run of this. So I did not take the third run because it makes 4 out of them, then it's sort of squarish.
Yeah.
But I did take the one chord and...
That's a wonderful making a moment more amplitudinous without compromising structural
structure.
integrity.
Just speaking about structure, it's amazing that Rachmaninoff, who is famous for his beautiful melodies, chooses such a un-Rachmaninoff-y melody or main theme. This is the melody. This is the main theme of the sonata. That's it. It's not the second concerto. It's not the third. It's not the second symphony. It's nothing like that. It's almost Beethovenian in the way he takes the smallest possible subject
Very terse.
And then squeezes every ounce of melodic, harmonic counterpoint potential from it. And I think that overall, for the structure and for the unity of the sonata, this choice of a very short
and very angular, chromatic then angular
motive, it does wonders for the sonata because it's united. Well, many of Rachmaninoff's works have monothematic ideas, like in the third concerto when he brings back the main theme in the second, and so on. But I think this is on a higher level, and I really love it.
In many ways, it seems to me that this second sonata, especially in the 1931 version, has the same kind of terseness and economy as the symphonic dances.
Oh yes,
because and the fourth concerto.
Mm-hmm. Though I must say,
does the first concerto too?
Yes, I agree. Though I must say that the symphonic dances, at least in the 2-piano version, enjoy from something that he also had in the variations on a Rhapsody on a theme by Paganini, which is a much thinner texture.
Yes.
You know? And I'm constantly thinking, why hasn't he written more things like that? We usually tend to think of Rachmaninoff as about someone who has found his voice very early on and then kept to it. Yes. But it seems that he was making changes and progress because the texture, all right, so not the language, not such shifts as with Stravinsky or with Picasso, but he was doing things differently. And I think that those developments were hugely promising, and it always feels like a shame that he didn't pursue them further, or that he just didn't have the chance, or didn't live.
Yes.
But
he lived enough time.
Yeah,
yes.
We can't fault that comparing it to him to Schubert, Mozart, but it's just the circumstances.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's what really marks out this edition that you're using as something proper in its own right, because in its terseness it has these things in common with the works we've just mentioned.
Oh yes, it's
and therefore it's a composition in its own right. It's not a cut work.
Oh no, not at all.
It's stylistically compatible with what he was doing around the same time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if one compares with the first version just the texture, a chord with 4 notes would have 8 notes in the first version, and these. I cannot play it. It's.
You've only been playing for 36 hours.
The pages look black in the original edition, and yeah.
Well, I hope after these 3 really intensive days, which I've enjoyed, I hope as much as you have.
Oh, absolutely. It's been great fun.
I hope you've got some rest now. You're going to have a nice, relaxed meal tonight, aren't you?
Oh yes. Though I was saying yesterday, it's a slight pity that it's just one day that was left, because it's really been a great pleasure.
Me too.